Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to revisit a video I did last year for SPFBO9. It's just a bit of fun and it's going to give a bit of an insight into one of the shallower aspects of my reading tastes. I'm going to pick the winner of SPFBO9 based purely on the title. So that's right, today I'm going to be picking my winner of SPFBO9 based purely on the title. So of course this isn't a serious video, it's just a bit of fun, but it'll give a bit of an insight into my reading taste when it comes to the type of titles that appeal to me. Now this might be because I've enjoyed books with similar titles as much as you can attribute any of that to the title itself, or it might be something about the title that really intrigues me and makes me want to learn more. I'm going to follow roughly the same format as I did for last year's video. I'm going to go through the 10 individual judging groups for SPFBO9, pick out a few titles from each group, and then from there take one finalist from each of those 10 groups, and I will rank my top 10 titles. So just as a quick note on that last little bit, this isn't necessarily going to be my 10 favourite titles from the competition. It's possible that 2 or more of my favourites might be in the same group, and of course only one of those will make it through to the final. So I'm just going to go through the 10 groups in the order they're listed on Mark Lawrence's blog. I'll put a link to that down below this video so you can go and check it out for yourself and see all of the titles that are involved. There's no minimum or maximum number that I'm going to take from each group. It's just a case of how many of the titles I like for each of them to move into what I'll go through now, which is essentially the equivalent of my semi-final. So starting at the top of that list gives us Fantasy Faction to kick us off, and I'm going to choose 5 from this group, starting off with Fortress of the Lost Amulet. I've then got the Moss Dragon of Brittle Keep, the Doctrines of Fire, An Ocean of Others, and The Traitors We Are. Now one of the things I like about these, and you'll see this as I go through all of the titles that I've chosen as my semi-finalists today, they're all kind of different titles. You often do get very formulaic titles in fantasy, the something of something or the something of something and something. Obviously you don't tend to see the word something in the titles quite that often, but you get what I mean. It's a blank that I've just filled in there. Some of the titles today might fall into that category, but not very many of them. So I like how these all sound kind of unique and kind of intriguing, and there are some good strong candidates in this opening group. My second group was one of the short groups. I've only got 3 semi-finalists from Fantasy Book Critic. They are Curse of the Fallen, The Last Ranger, and The Veil That Twisted Fate. So I like how there's a bit of range in these titles. None of them really sound anything like the other two, and none of them give too much away as to what I might be expecting from the books themselves. One of the biggest groups is next. This is Lynn's books and the Critiquing Chemist. I've got 6 titles from this group, starting with Dream of Death City. I've then got Deathless Beast, Legacy of the Vermilion Blade, Arrival Most Vile, No Heart for a Thief, and The Many Shades of Midnight. So again, I've got a good range of titles here, including one kind of comedy title, Arrival Most Vile. I like the wordplay that you've got on there, and the other books in the series actually that I have seen as well. There's also a bit of a dark undertone to these titles, with 2 of them featuring death, and you've got a thief, and you've got a blade, and you've got midnight in there as well. It's actually another group of 6 now from the Weatherwax report, starting out with A Quiet Vengeance. I've then got The Bleeding Stone, Kill Your Darlings, The Certainty of Blood, Echoes of Dragons, and The Ghosts in the Flames. Again, there's some intrigue across these titles. I don't really know what to expect from the books based on the titles, and I do quite like that. Next up from Becky M, we've got another small group with just 3 titles in here. I've got The Fall Is All There Is, Angel from the Rust, and The Relic Thief. So again, this is a batch where none of the titles have any kind of relation to each other. There's no correlation there. It's just 3 independently really good titles for me. Before We Go blog is next, and they also have 3 titles in their semi-final. I've got Of Deeds Most Valiant, Through Dreams So Dark, and Shadow of a Winter Moon. So again, some dark undertones to these titles. Even that first one, Of Deeds Most Valiant, kind of speaks to me as someone fighting out against the dark. Queen's Book Asylum next has 4 titles on their semi-final list that I've selected, starting with Scarlet and Sunder, Carved Amidst the Shadows is next, and then we've got Wings of the Storm and the Wildness. So that last one is very kind of distinctive because of the way that it starts with and. You don't really tend to see that. It's quite a brave choice, I think, for a title of a book. Team Bookborn is next, my group, and I've got 5 titles here. A Spring for Spears, Daughter of the Beast, A Thing Immortal, The Price of Power, and To Steal the Sun. With these, I've read one of them for my allocation. I'm literally about to start another of them, but I'm judging this purely on the titles rather than anything that's contained within the books themselves. And then I've got 6 more titles, 3 each from Philip Chase and covers with Cassidy. For Philip's batch, I've got The Monsters We Feed, Shadows That Bind Us, and Embrace the Shade. So again, some quite dark titles, and does seem to be an overriding theme throughout all of these, which does, I guess, tell you a little bit about the type of fantasy that I enjoy. It makes it sound at least like I'm not here for the light stuff, although I do enjoy some of that as well. And then from Cassidy's group to round us out, I've got A Sword of the Three Rivers, Grace Defenders, and Dark Strider. So each of those titles getting a little bit shorter as they go, which just shows that there's no real kind of formula for what makes a good title for me. It could be a short one, a long one, anywhere in between. It's just the composition, the words that are used, and the intrigue that they bring to the book. So there we've got my semi-finalists. Now I'm going to rank them in reverse order to give you my final 10, and at the end of that, of course, my winning title, the one that I like the most. So as you'll notice, I haven't yet announced what the 10 finalists are going to be. I'll uncover those as I get to them, so kind of dragging out a little bit longer, I suppose. But I'm going to start off with one of the titles that I just read out to you from Covers with Cassidy's group. In 10th place, I've gone with Dark Strider by Aaron Hodges. This one doesn't really tell us too much. It sounds like it's an individual person, maybe. Possibly it's a type of person, but for me, Dark Strider says it's the name of someone. It really makes me think of kind of an epic or a high fantasy of old, where you've got a character walking across the land doing valiant deeds, essentially. And the book that it immediately brings to my mind is Waylander by the great David Gemmell. 9th place is taken up by a title from the Weatherwax Report. I've gone with Kill Your Darlings by L.E. Harper. This one's quite an unusual name. It sounds to me like it could possibly be kind of a contemporary fantasy. Maybe it's talking about an author who is killing off the characters in the book. I don't know, but it's a very intriguing title, and I think from memory it's quite an intriguing cover as well. In 8th place, I've gone with a title from the semi-finalists of Before We Go blog. I'm going with Of Deeds Most Valiant by Sarah K.L. Wilson. This one, again, is another one that's got a pretty cool cover, which I think really encapsulates the title. It sounds, as I mentioned before, I think, like a high fantasy or an epic fantasy with people fighting against the darkness, and I really like that in a good fantasy book. Queen's Book Asylum takes up number 7, and I've got a title here by Susan Maxwell. It's that unusually titled And the Wildness. I'm just really intrigued by this title. It just sounds, I think, quite cool actually. As I said, it's quite a brave choice for a title, but I do think it works. And then in 6th place, I've got a book from Fantasy Book Critic. I've gone with Vow That Twisted Fate by Catherine D. Graham. This one, again, I think is a really interesting title. It sounds like you might have quite a story to tell here from what this vow is and how it twisted fate, and what exactly does that mean for all of the characters in the world that this book's going to be set in. Into the top 5 now, and I've got a book from my allocation, or from my team Bookborn, but this one is actually one of the titles that is assigned to me to read. I've gone with To Steal the Sun by S.M. Carter. I do like a good heist fantasy. I do like a thief as a character if it's done well in fantasy, and I'm hoping that's what I'm going to get from this one. That's exactly what it sounds like. Obviously, this is one of the titles that I know a bit more about, so I've read the synopsis, I've looked into it, but the title just in isolation I think is a pretty cool one. It sounds like pretty much the biggest of big heists that you can get. In 4th place, we go into a book from Philip Chase's selection. I've chosen The Monsters We Feed by Thomas Howard Riley. Again, this one I think is a really imaginative title. There's a few different things that could mean. Are they literally monsters that we feed, or the monsters inside us? Are we feeding our own kind of internal demons, so to speak? I don't know, but I'm definitely intrigued by the title on its own. Onto the podium then, and third place in my list is taken by Lynn's Books and the Critiquing Chemist. From their selection, I've gone with No Heart for a Thief by James Lloyd Stewlin. Again, I've just spoken about Thieves with To Steal the Sun. I do like the title there. I know more about this book because I've read the book and its sequel, which I've recently proofread, and I really enjoyed what the kind of title element actually means from reading a book. But taking it just in isolation, I would go somewhere completely different, and I would go with a more typical thief, maybe in an urban setting, in a fantasy city, going about and stealing things, having a rollicking good time until he gets way too deep in something and he ends up fighting for survival. The book I've given second place to in SPFBO9 based on its title goes to one of the allocation from Fantasy Faction. I've got The Traitors We Are by Michael Roberti. So Michael himself chose An Ocean of Others for his kind of winner for this one, but I've overlooked that one and gone for Michael's book instead. I just think it sounds like a really cool title. I'm intrigued by what it means. I'm intrigued by the book itself, knowing what it's about and some of the elements in it. But I think, again, just in isolation, the title is a really interesting one. And then talking of interesting titles, of course, it's number one, my winner, based on the title alone. If you've been keeping track, you'll know that this one is from Becky M's selection. There weren't many, I think it was only 3 semi-finalists I chose from her batch. The one I've chosen as my winner is C.M. Kaplan's The Fall Is All There Is. So there's a couple of things this one can mean to me. Is it the act of falling, someone actually falling from a horse, for instance, someone falling from power? Is it fall as in the season, autumn as we call it over here in the UK? I don't know, but it sounds very interesting. I like it when a title asks questions before you even get into the book, and that one definitely does it here for me. So there we go, there's my quick run through of my favourite titles in this year's SPFBO competition. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of my choices. What would you have chosen instead of the ones that I picked, either for my semi-finalists or going forward to my final and then as my winning title. I'll hopefully see you again in the next video sometime soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.